Hey, this is Cedric. Today's episode of the Bitcoin Matrix podcast with Texas Slim is brought to you by LEDN.io, a better home for your Bitcoin. LEDN is a secure, simple, and easy-to-use platform for managing and growing your digital wealth. With industry-best interest rates on savings, use your Bitcoin as collateral for loans or double your Bitcoin stack with their Buy 2X program. As of November 1st, you can now start earning 9.5% on your USDC and 6.25% on your first 2 Bitcoin. Already a LEDN client? From now on, when a new LEDN client signs up using your referral link and funds their BTC or USD savings account, they can receive 10 USDC as a reward, deposited straight into their account. Terms and conditions apply. The signer must create an account with your referral link, deposit at least 75 USDC or 0.0015 BTC into their LEDN account for 15 days. Listeners of the Bitcoin Matrix podcast still get an exclusive offer of 50 free USDC when you become a LEDN user and take out a LEDN loan using our link. We only have a few more weeks with LEDN, so I hope you guys are taking advantage of these amazing offers. Learn more, sign up, and get earning at start.ledn.io/Bitcoin Matrix. In this eye-opening conversation with Texas Slim, we discuss why we have medical and chemical companies growing our food, nutritional starvation, and how food intelligence is the citadel of your mind. And now, let's enter the Bitcoin Matrix with Texas Slim.
What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Texas Slim is the author of The Harvest of Deception, The Leverage of the Seed, Political Beef Deception, High Values Lifestyles, Rent-Seeking Lifestyle is Cuck Life, Source of the Seed, and Harvest of Deception Part 2. Texas Slim is part of a decentralized brain trust. He believes that food intelligence is the citadel of your mind. He is the founder of the Texas Beef Initiative and a badass by default. Texas Slim, welcome to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well, Cedric. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. I love your work. I love your approach, and I've been looking forward to tonight.
Oh, I really appreciate that. That's really great to hear. I've been really digging your work. I came across it on Twitter, and I jumped to your articles. And you know, these are themes that I've kind of wrestled with, I think, my whole life, but I've never seen them sort of tied together in this manner, and with certain perspectives that you bring to the conversation. And to get a little bit more context, I'd love to hear sort of where you and your family are from in Texas and what life is like. I mean, you mentioned in the article that you've lived a life of grit. And I think, people from the city, can live a certain life of grit maybe and learn trials and tribulations. But to get some context, I'd love to hear more about the Panhandle in Texas.
Sure. I grew up in a little small town called Canyon, Texas. It's outside of Amarillo, Texas. Amarillo, which is yellow in Spanish. We have a lot of great sunsets, but it's a desert high plains, basically. It's like a good old Clint Eastwood movie a lot of times. But my ancestors, I'm a 7th generational Texan. My grandfather came to the Texas Panhandle and established the family farm, his parents basically in the late 1800s. And so that was a very rugged and pioneering time for the state of Texas. We had just gotten finished with the Comanche Wars, and those lasted up until the late 1870s, basically. And then really the Panhandle opened up with the cattle drives and everything. Charles Goodnight, Oliver Loving, and there's a lot of Texas heritage there. Canyon's a small town. I was born and raised, in the typical small town Texas. We have dirt roads. We had a small university there. It wasn't too small. It wasn't too big. But one thing it was a life of a lot of hard work, a lot of blue collar skill sets. And what we did is, growing up, you had to be tough. I mean, we ate beef. We worked on the farms. We fed livestock. We played sports. We broke bones. We learned a lot of things that, the city guys didn't learn. But then we did have, a city close to us. So there was an educational aspect of growing up in a small town, but I did have the access to some pretty good quality education as well. It wasn't any higher education. It was more of our small town had a lot of professors. A lot of my friends' dads were professors, from biology to business to philosophy. So it was pretty interesting mix. And, I got tired of small town Texas. The time I was about 18, 19, I packed up my car and I drove straight to Austin. And I landed on 6th Street, got a job. And, my family had some struggles because of the 80s. My grandfather, he was not farming anymore. So he had to move into a town. So, the farming lifestyle of our family broke apart in the 80s because of the farming industry was destroyed. By the 80s, we had Farm Aid, you had Willie Nelson, you had all these things that were happening. And I got to experience that within my own ancestral family, from aunts and uncles to friends and family to my grandfather, which, I highly respected him. And so I wanted to start over. So I got into Austin. I started sneaking into the University of Texas. I brought some grit with me. I didn't have any money, so I just went to school, and I basically went to any class I wanted to University of Texas. So I was able to work myself into technology. I started reading books before they were really teaching good technology. And I got into some really good startups and software design companies. And one of them was a company called CyberCore. And what we did was we allowed you to trade from your computer top to the ECNs of Wall Street. So all of a sudden, here I am a technologist. I'm a network guy, and I'm starting to understand software. I'm starting to understand how the internet works, all that kind of stuff, the back end stuff. Well, I ended up, through several jobs positions, I ended up working in intelligence labs for a telecom company. And so here we go. I started building a whole new intelligence skill set. And from my grit from the small town Texas, here I am in Austin, Texas, which is booming in technology and intelligence, And so that's kind of how I've been able to frame everything that I'm doing right now.
Right. When you went to Austin, what do you think where were you looking to maybe take your life, or what were you trying to achieve maybe with like a lifestyle for yourself by leaving where you were and going off on your own?
Well, I've always had a big wanderlust. I'd always said, "Hey, I'm going to go there. I'm going to make this happen." I knew that Austin was more international than anything that I had access to. So I wanted to ingrain myself into the University of Texas because I knew a lot about UT. I knew that it was an international school. I was going to be in the travel industry somehow. That's what I was shooting for. When I did move to Austin, I did start meeting people. I started working across the United States. I started working in resorts. And so I started road tripping. By meeting all these international friends, guess what? I've been around the world twice now. I've used the restroom on 5 continents. So, it all kind of combined just by going there. I wanted to travel. That's the one thing I wanted to do. And then all of a sudden, I didn't get into technology because it was something that was overly fascinating to me. I found it very fascinating because I compared the internet to hydraulics, and I understood how hydraulics worked in like a big equipment, how you could push a lever and something changes. That's how the internet works, with zeros and ones, and how we network our way in our communication structure. And so I was able to get some from my old small town grit into a new kind of technology that was about to take over the world.
Right. When you talk about like an intelligence lab of the telecommunications companies, You know, it doesn't have to be like what you did, but what is sort of like an apparatus like that trying to achieve, or what do they do on sort of like a yearly basis? Are they trying to come up with maybe new technology to deploy within their own vertical, or is this looking at competitors? Is this sort of like CIA?
All of the above.
Yeah,
It's all of the above. I mean, you can look up room 641A. You can find out about AT&T and the NSA. When you ask that question, let's put it in perspective. The telecoms companies, really, there's only one telephone company in the world. It's the United States. The telecommunications industry is as close as the government as you can get. So anything that we are doing right now, like our conversation right now, we're going through a highway system. There's so much that people do not understand about telecommunications. We take it for granted. It's the stupid AT&T, it's stupid Verizon, it's stupid Sprint. Those assholes don't have any good customer service. So, you know, you look at the telecommunications, they are the beginning of everything that you're doing in life. I'm sorry, it's the bell. I mean, let's look back at World War II. Why didn't they just shut off Hitler's telecommunications? They could have. It was part of our telecommunications. We had the control of it. We had the technology of it. So it's very vast. So it touches government. It touches touches every country in the world. So they're always working on progressive technology, from wireless, you know, and all kinds of different things that never even make it to market. They always have 10 projects they're working on that never see the light of day. And you have to balance that with software companies. You have to balance that with and social media. And then, you know, when I was with there, we were balancing it with broadband was really starting to take off. And all of a sudden 2 households were going, you know, a household was going from 2 devices to 12 devices. And so, you know, telecommunications always has to stay in front of that. And so there's all kinds of things that you can do within the telecommunications that touches national security. It touches intelligence. It touches everything that we do every day of our life.
right. And so someone working in those kind of labs, would there be a political nature to it, or would they be aware of anything related to sort of those kind of things?
I think we started seeing that whenever I was with them. It was before, you know, you had the Brexit that became very political, and that was something that was going on. That was before I was there, a little bit during 9/11, a little right around. I just got started. I wasn't really into the intelligence labs at that time, but what I was doing was leading in that direction. And so after, you know, the Patriot Act, after travel got restricted, things did get very political, and that what you touched, and that's when I referred to room 641A. That's whenever we started doing domestic spying. Well, who was the first telecommunications industry that did that? United States. Right. So
it's interesting, whenever you go over the Brooklyn Bridge, going from Manhattan to Brooklyn or vice versa, there's the Verizon building. Yeah. And it's sort of the ugliest building in the world. It's no windows.
And no window building. Yes.
Yeah. And it always seems to project state power to me. I can't imagine how, you know, Verizon was able to, you know, kind of have that building in the way that they do if it was just for commercial use or something of that nature, just because of where it is, how it looks, the value of the property. And, you know, before we get to sort of the highway systems of telecommunications and the internet and really more food intelligence, but going back to the dirt roads, what were some of the generational challenges that, you know, your family faced over the years? I mean, like, can you describe like what the Dust Bowl was like?
Sure. My grandfather, you know, he started farming when he was probably 8 years old. That's whenever he almost went out on his own. You had different types of farming back then, of course. Well, he survived the Dust Bowl. He was at his prime during that time. He had a couple of kids at that time. My mother was not born yet, but what it was, especially in the Texas Panhandle, he was 100 miles away from the epicenter of the Dust Bowl. And so what they had done to cause the Dust Bowl, farming had taken off in a way that you were starting to see a centralized way of farming. and we'll go back to that a little bit later, but they destroyed the soil, the topsoil. And so it made it very loose. They were not tilling the ground properly. And so once we had some drought and we have wind in West Texas, you start creating the Dust Bowl. It went on for a good decade. It destroyed economies. It destroyed farms. A lot of people migrated out to California at that time from Oklahoma and Texas. Well, my grandparents, they stuck it out, and they lived on a dirt road, and they went to town maybe once a week. That was 20 miles away. Well, some of the, if it rained, you were stuck on the farm for weeks on end. You had one phone line that was a party line, and it talked to, everybody around you on that dirt road. But they had a way of decentralized living back then that was fascinating. They grew their own food. They raised their own beef, their animal protein. They had their chickens, they had their hog, they had their steer, and they, of course, grew their own crops. And so, it was, farm to table every day. And looking back, I'm fascinating how it got hijacked, how it has changed from me hoeing cotton whenever I was just a runt, and going out and doing harvest, and we would harvest all of our vegetables for the rest of the year. Nobody does that anymore. And that was that. And I had 7 to 8 uncles and aunts. We fed every family. Nobody ever wanted for any good, pure produce. We always had it.
Right. It's interesting when you say, you talk about the Dust Bowl. I feel like intellectually, we're living in an information Dust Bowl right now. And you talk about like true wealth. I think about true wealth in terms of like farm to table and sort of the survival tools that gives you. And then I think, after the Dust Bowl, I mean, what was it? The Great Depression, World War II. I mean, there's a lot of challenges there, and that are probably not survivable if you're not capable of having grown your own food.
I like how you phrase that, because I think I wrote it the other day, and I said, we're in 1931 right now, and people don't know what that means, because we have a decade that we're about to go through that a lot of people aren't ready for. And we look back at the Great Depression, there was a lot of hungry people, but I guarantee the hungry people, when they did eat, they had better nutrition than we do. Their soup was better than our steak in a lot of ways. And so that's how I see us moving forward. They had hunger. They had scarcity of food a little bit, but they didn't have scarcity of nutrition. Well, we're going to have plenty of food. We'll probably go through a small food supply shortage, but we're about to go through a nutrition starvation that people don't know.
Right. And that's where I think government kind of comes into play a lot here. And
yes,
but even going back further than, around to the time we've been talking about, how did government kind of get into farming? And we get the Department of Agriculture, and what kind of effects did that have on, your town or farming communities?
Well, what happened is the first thing they did is they engineered and invented a new plow system to where the dirt would fold over different than it had been doing. So in a way, they were good. The USDA was good. The agriculture department was good. They saved farming in a lot of ways. But by bringing in the government, by creating the USDA as we knew it since the Great Depression, guess what? We opened up a lot of doors that we did not realize. And so going with the Great Depression, surviving it as a farmer and a rancher in the state of Texas, you saved, you're going to have some prosperity, because you had to, when we had gold conversation, then we had the war, and we had, metal shortages. We had everything that goes on during a war. Well, we're about to go through that again. Once again, this is going to be something that is fabricated. By bringing in the government into farming, that was the very beginning, I think, of socializing our food supply in a way that is about to open the door to these global companies creating a one world food group. And it's taken that long. It's taken 90 years to do it, but they've been waiting and they've been planning ever since probably after, let's go back to whenever the fiat in the United States became the world currency. So, we could go on for days talking about this, but I see that was really, it did open the doors. And we did have some very good years of robust farming that was built on old tradition. And it started with the equipment and it evolved, unfortunately, up until 1971. And when, what the F happened in 1971, well, here we go. You're going to farm fence line to fence line. You're not going to grow 4 crops anymore. And if you don't grow just one crop, then you're going to be out of business. Sorry.
Right. You mentioned One World Food Group. We're seeing a lot of One World everything. In terms of crops, though, you spent what seemed like the summer embedding yourself in this this gargantuan industry. So I'd kind of like to hear, how do you embed yourself, or what does that mean, as much as you could share?
Sure.
And then let's get into what did you experience?
You bet. The harvest industry in the United States of America is big. It's very large. You have some old traditional guys that are, inherited the tradition and the skill sets, and you have their families basically, and they'll run a harvest crew of about 20 something guys, usually about 7 to 8 combines. And then you have another harvest industry.
What's a combine?
Combine is like if you're going to harvest your wheat, it's the big, people would say tractor, but it's bigger than a tractor. It has a big header on it that's probably 30 feet wide, and what it is, that's the chopper. So you'll drive that combine into the field of wheat, and that chopper will take the wheat off of the stalk, and it'll shove it into basically a bin that holds that seed on the combine. They're very big and vast machines.
So you need 7 to 8 drivers on the 7 to 8 combines.
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
I didn't mean to cut you off. So
no, that's fine. That's fine. But so you have a lot of opportunity to go work harvest if you're a young man in the United States of America. People don't realize this. Especially now, nobody wants to work, and they're always looking for somebody. So I have the skill set of being a small town Texas boy, and it had been a while, but I knew something was up for a while, ever since COVID, especially, but I've known something about food for a long time. And I said, screw this. I've got to go and check it out. I got to get my boots on the ground, and I'm going to go do this because it's in my blood. I owe it to my grandfather, for one, to see what's really going on. And I want to see how corrupt it is. And the only way you do that, you don't do it behind a computer. You got to be out there. So I wrote a pretty long email, and I'm a pretty good writer. And, I had some people contact me, and this one family out of Kansas contacted me, and they said, get to Kansas. And I said, let's do this. And so go ahead.
Is the family the owner of the harvesting company?
Yes.
Not whatever that means.
Yeah. Yes.
Got it.
They own everything. I didn't want to go into a big operation. I wanted to be more intimate with the people that I was working with, intimate with the people that had a history in harvesting, because their family started it in the 1950s. And so they'd been in it for a while.
So this 20-man crew, is
Yes.
it pretty tight knit? Do these guys see each other every year or every couple seasons or more than that?
Yeah, the usually line of working harvest, and it's usually young men, because you got to be tough. You got to be, you got to be strong. You got to have some skill sets that comes from, basically understanding heavy equipment. 3 years is usually the stint. And after they get that type of life skill, they're pretty equipped to move on, because it's such a rough season. These guys, some of them will work 9 to 10 months straight, and it is sun up to sundown, and it's anytime. You don't have no 9 to 5. It's whenever the weather, the sun, and the season is dictating, you're going to harvest that seed. So I embedded myself into a harvest crew. I was just some guy that, I used to do it. I'm city boy now, or that's how, they looked at me, because they've really never been in cities.
Is there hazing?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's the worst hazing you're going to come through. Maybe the military is, worse, but I don't even know about the military anymore. They got restrictions.
Mhm.
But as far as true hazing, you better be based or you're going to get the shit kicked out of you.
Right.
Honestly, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not, there's no gentle time. And especially the young guys, if you show up and you're a liar, or if you're not honest, or if you're not a hard worker, you're going to get sniffed out really fast and you're not going to last.
Right. What kind of like stuff are you guys doing? I mean, all that hazing, whatever it is to build trust.
Mhm.
So what is a day like? I mean, from getting up early, what kind of equipment are you working with? How many different jobs are you working in a day?
Sure.
Are you moving locations in one day?
Sure. I'll just give you I'll give you a trip from Kansas to North Dakota. We did. You wake up 3 o'clock in the morning. The night before, you had basically loaded all of your combines, all your tractors, all your fuel trucks onto trailers, everything. So you got about 12 combines. I mean, 12 tractor trailer semis. And so you get all heavy equipment loaded up and then you hit the road, and you got to hit right when the sun comes up because you can't drive across the United States with that much of heavy equipment when it's dark. So you push as hard as you can. And we made it to North Dakota because you basically lose an hour. So you gain an hour because of the time change. Well, you get off, you get to North Dakota, you end up in a small little town, about 300 people, and you have a little RV park and a big parking lot, and you unload all that equipment. So once you've got all that equipment unloaded, you got to put tires on the combines. These tires are 8 feet tall. They weigh, good half a ton each. You don't lift those things up. You've got to use the combine, a separate combine, to put a wheel on the other combine. So it's quite the orchestration to get all of your equipment ready. You got to get your grain carts ready. You've got to get your combines ready. You got to get your headers put onto the combines. And so this is all not everybody knows how to do it, but everybody gets into a flow and you work as a team. So you got 25 guys and there's nobody really bossing. It just kind of flows because these guys have got some skill sets of growing up in small towns. This is what they know, and they're very good at it, and they take pride in it. And this is like, this is when you'll get hazing. Guys now they'll wear a beard and they're 25 years old. They don't even know how to drive a stick shift, But if you don't know anything, you better be honest. Say, I don't know. Teach me. And guys will jump up and they'll teach you. Well, I'm pretty good. You can learn a lot of things. I know how to operate a combine, tractors, all that kind of stuff. So I was okay, but there's some guys that aren't okay. And so they leave in the middle of the night. They'll go back to mama, and they'll jump the fence, as we call it. So once you get that ready, you go to a field the next morning, right when the sun is coming up, and you'll have, let's say one field is 2,000 acres. 2 combines go out there. They cut the field, is what it is. They'll cut the sequencing. They'll cut the direction, and then everybody flows into place. And so you get 7 combines cut in one direction. One of them's right behind the other on the separate row. And so they're just stacking up. You can look for YouTube videos and just do a fall harvest, and some fascinating videos will pop up. But then you have grain carts that the tractor drivers will chase down the combines. The combines on the fly will put the grain into the grain carts the tractor has. And so you have chutes, hydraulic chutes going, you're driving, you're harvesting, you're collecting, and then the tractor and the grain carts will go to the semis, put the grain into the semi trailers, and the trailers go to the silos.
Right. Yeah, it sounds incredible. I could also just imagine the pressure, when you jump the fence. I mean, because if you fuck up, like, you're going to screw up a whole day. And so what kind of planning is involved from the harvesting company or the harvesters and the farmers, and trying to coordinate this activity? Because you are expected probably to be there on the right day. And then somewhere else probably at the right time. So how is that kind of figured out?
What happens is, probably 2 weeks before the grain is dry enough for it to be harvested, it's beyond its ripe period and starting to dry out. There's a key couple of about 2 weeks that it's very key. The harvester and the farmer are talking to each other daily. He says, you get here 2 days early because we might hit. And so what they're doing is they're looking at barometric pressure. They're looking at the weather, looking for rain. If it rains, you're screwed for a couple of days. And so they're timing basically the weather, and they're timing the moisture content of the grain. And so with that, you're making sure that you got all of your diesel fuel. You're making sure you got your full crew. If somebody screws up, does jump the fence, you've got backup. You drop a combine out, he moves to a trailer, he moves to a semi. So most everybody has their CDLs. Most people know the tractor. Most people know the combine. You don't miss a beat. You might take a combine out of the mix, and that's going to be the only thing that you affect. So instead of 7 combines, you go down to 6, but you're always getting that grain. And you're always knowing the moisture content exactly right when you start cutting every morning. So you got a crew that goes out, tests the moisture, takes it back to the silos. They test it in these machines that have been around for many, many years, and they know exactly what the moisture content. So that's key. Let's cut. Let's go do 2,000 acres. And so sometimes we're finished with 2,000 acres. It's been 9-10 hours. Hey, we got another field. Turn on your headlights. We're going to go do another 2,000 acres.
Right. And you say 2,000 acres. I mean, what kind of scale are we talking about beyond just this one job? I mean, is this just vast beyond, what the eye can see?
Yeah, for sure. You go up to North Dakota. North Dakota is rural. There's some big cities. There's about 2 pretty large cities, but everything else is grasslands and farmlands. So we're cutting wheat. You can see for miles and miles rolling hills of golden wheat. It's like a movie. There was actually a couple of movies filmed there back in the 50s and 60s. It's very beautiful. It's very rural. You don't have a lot of pollution of cables, overhead cables. You have your power lines, but it's a throwback. And so you have many, many combine companies that hit North Dakota in the month of July to get the winter wheat gone. And then you start on the summer wheat. And then we'll talk about what I found out on harvest here in a little bit.
Yeah. Now you bring up wheat, and before we get to the people and these small towns and the farmers, what kind of crops were you harvesting?
Yeah, that was kind of what I just mentioned. Usually it's just wheat. And in the past, it was just wheat. That's all we did. We did wheat. And as a nation, we did wheat during this time of the year. We didn't really have any much. We had sunflowers. But what this harvest crew did, and what made it start getting very fascinating very quick, is almost half of our harvest was basically rapeseed. Rapeseed is what they make canola out of. And this year, in the last 3 years, wheat prices have been going down. Farmers have been growing less wheat, and they've been growing more canola, rapeseed. Rapeseed was outlawed by the FDA in 1956 for any type of human consumption. Well, guess what? After 1971, what happened? We start making fake commodities. And here we are, 30, 50 years later, canola is about to catch up with wheat in this nation. Canola is a fake commodity. It has no nutritional value. It is a toxic poison when it's heated. It is in everything that we eat, from oils, fried foods, to candy, to bread, to anything we touch. There's some form of a canola in there, along with corn, which is horrible fructose corn syrup. And then, of course, the big one that I hate, even above all of them, is soy protein, genetically modified soybean. So what we did was wheat and canola, and half of our harvest this year was canola, rapeseed.
Well, what I can't get over, and what I think we're driving at here is, on one hand of it, though, you got the marketing of America, and we were able to convince the world that these things were good, not just for Americans, but for everyone. Right. And I it's amazing. Like, you can go to like Fiji or the Philippines, where they can grow their own olive oil or even other kinds of natural fats, and they're using our cornstarch or our vegetable oils that look like sludge.
Yeah.
And maybe they've seen, they use as an example the A/B test that Americans are bigger, It used to be bigger and stronger. Now I think we're just bigger. But I mean, you say false commodity. I think we really kind of have to go a little more into that. What, like, because it was the first time I ever heard that kind of phrase.
Sure.
So, what can you elaborate more on, like,
Yeah.
how did we create a false commodity? What is a false commodity, and what does that do to the marketplace, and some of the effects it has?
Well, this is the best way to explain it, because I explain it from a Bitcoiner's kind of perspective, because we look at, what happened in 1971. Well, we got off the gold standard, so we had basically a false value in our monetary system anymore. So what do we have to do? We have to create false value in the market. Mm-hmm. So we started creating a lot of false value in society. We started creating a lot of false value in our money, of course. A lot of things started happening that you can reflect on now. It's like, wow, that really did happen after 1971. Well, let's look at the food industry. That's whenever Mr. Butts told from the Nixon administration, says, you will go fence to fence. You better go big or go home. So let's see what we can do that we can actually do with our seed now. Let's see what kind of industry we can do around our food. So what did we start doing? We started modifying in ways how we grew our seeds, from pesticides to herbicides. We were growing stuff that we didn't need to grow. And what we were doing was we were creating, you said marketing plan. We were creating a marketing plan around food. And what do we have to do? Well, people used to cook in lard. Lard wasn't profitable. It's too durable. It lasts too long. You can use it too often. It does too good. It's healthy, but they fix that really quick with the cholesterol. So let's get this rapeseed. Let's turn it into something. We're going to create a false commodity that actually creates a false industry to basically get a vegetable seed and make it into oil. You want to talk about the type of technology and everything that goes along with that. So processing that seed into a vegetable oil is just not pressing it down with a stone. You've got to do all kinds of things with chemicals. You've got to do everything with processing plants. Once again, you're creating a false industry around a false commodity. What does that do to our stock exchange? It looks like, hey, we're actually getting out of this false value of money. See, we know what we're doing. So we create a false identity around our food, and then we create false marketing plans around our food. Then we create a false sense of health around our food that has led to metabolic bankruptcy up to right now. And that's where we are. 78% of Americans are obese and overweight. 1 out of 2 is diabetic or pre-diabetic. 46% of our kids are overweight or obese between the ages of 5 and 11. That started after 1971. That started with the creation of what I call false commodities. And canola rapeseed is not the only one. Fructose corn syrup is a false commodity. Soybean, genetically modified soybean, is a false commodity. Any type of seed oil is a false commodity. And you look what that did to the agricultural department. It created big ag as we know it today. It took the farmer out of farming and it put it into the hands of the bureaucrats and to the people that were basically creating a false dollar.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack there that I want to get into, but
sure.
I want to ask you why is the harvest spiritual?
Well, I mean, you can go back to biblical times. It's talked about in the Bible, of course, harvest, wheat, everything is discussed. The reason it's kind of spiritual for me is because it's this changing of seasons. We have the harvest moon. My grandfather never listened to a weather report day one. He followed the Farmer's Almanac. Farmer's Almanac goes back hundreds of years. It's because people looked at the stars. They looked at the sky. They tasted the dirt. There were things that they could do that you ask people to do now, they would be dumbfounded. What are you talking about? And so the harvest was something that you planned your whole year around. You reap what you sow, right? And so you had to plan. You had to live a very low time preference, high value life. You had to be very intentional about your food. You had to know what you were consuming, and you had to know how to prepare it. So we basically worshiped food in a way that was very spiritual. And until we really got into false commodities, the whole thing in the 70s, that was the decade of divorce. Families broke apart. We started having TV dinners. There's so many things that you can look at that basically took the spirituality out of the harvest. It was a guide. It was our Northern Star in so many ways that even the younger generations now, they don't have a clue what I'm talking about. And that makes me sad. We should respect the harvest more. We should truly know what the source of the seed was. By knowing the harvest, knowing the seasons, we know what the purity of the seed is. We don't think about the harvest anymore. We just think about, grocery aisles.
Yeah. I mean, I feel very disconnected from food and food sources. Even in the suburbs of New York City, my mom, we grew a vegetable garden in the back, and there was some connection there, but it was fleeting. It was very seasonal for us, one short season a year that we were able to grow something outside.
Right.
But you just go to the supermarket, and intellectually, you're just like, there's always everything here. Even if I'm growing some tomatoes at home, and you can go to the farmer's market during the season, but the supermarket's really key there. And there's we're so disconnected. And what I want to touch on, though, is how, like you were kind of touching on before, with like everything that happens to that seed to make it palatable, to make it edible. Where is, like, what's happening with the seeds and the genetic engineering of our food?
There's tons. And I'll start. Let's start with a good way to start right with the seed. Really, it was already starting to get messed with in the 70s and 80s, but in the 90s is when we really started genetically modifying the seed. We really started introducing GMO to the general public. We did it. Everybody hated it. Everybody was terrified of it. And so what you do is whenever you go into the seed, you modify it in a way that it's not supposed to be modified. You can say, well, yeah, it's going to help with, and this is a kicker right here, it's going to help with the yields. Okay. Agriculture became more about yields than about nutritional purity when we started messing with the genetically modified organisms. And so that's been 30 something years ago since, the 90s, and we did that. So they're getting very advanced with modifying the seeds that we use right now, to where a lot of these seeds can grow out of concrete if you put the right chemicals on them. And so that's dangerous. And this is a bigger story with that. The reason, I won't go there yet. We'll go there a little bit later. But by genetically modifying the seed, they didn't have to rely on the soil anymore. They relied on the pesticides and the herbicides. By genetically modifying that seed, they were able to do something called a technology agreement. And what that is, it's called a TAU, TGU, one of those two. I apologize. Sure. I've been doing a lot of research, but it's a technology agreement. And what that is, a farmer has to sign a technology agreement. That technology agreement, he cannot plant his crops anymore unless he signs a technology agreement with a chemical company. Do you know who that chemical company is?
I'm going to guess Monsanto.
Monsanto is not a grain company. It's a chemical company, but they're the ones that basically control all of the grain in the world right now, majority. So that's where messing with the seed has gotten us. And so if that farmer does not plant the right seed, or if he screws up anyway, if he doesn't use the right pesticide that they tell him to use or the right herbicide, he's not a farmer anymore. So that's how they were able to capture basically the agricultural, basically the whole agriculture as far as true farmers in the United States. They took the farmer out of it and they replaced it with pesticides and herbicides. And they did it with basically good marketing plans, and it's the science. And so they've really advanced what they've done. Okay, ever since they started genetically modifying the seed, what they do every year, they have a new seed ready. They can't use that old seed. And you can't brown bag. What farmers used to do is used to save their seeds. That's what got us here. That's how the Native Americans, did everything with the corn that we know, or that we knew in the beginning. They basically, very little of that corn is left. As they were creating all these new seeds, they were taking those pure seeds and they were creating a silo that they never told anybody about. So they're taking the pure seeds out of the market, designing genetically modified seeds, and replacing our pure seeds with GMO seeds.
Right.
And they're doing it hand in hand, lock, stock, and barrel with the medical, pharmaceutical, agricultural complex.
Yeah.
And the chemical companies, of course.
Yeah. And this is getting really broad, really massive.
Yes.
This is just changing everything. Even if you're not planting these seeds, there's cross-contamination and
Sure.
your seeds aren't coming back. Yep. So everything's changing here. And before we really get into some of maybe the effects on the, in our bodies, just long-term or something, but what is happening to our taste buds? I'm guessing you guys are as blown away by this conversation with Texas Slim as much as I am. And before we get back into it, because there's so much more, I want to share with you guys some information about Bitcoin 2022. For those of you who were there last year, I don't have to tell you guys how much fun it was. And honestly, if you don't have tickets yet, I don't know what you are waiting for. For Bitcoin 2022, the conference has expanded and will include a 4th day for a Sound Money Fest music festival. And organizers are expecting more than 30,000 Bitcoiners. The Bitcoin 2022 conference, which celebrates Bitcoin over 4 days, April 6th through 9th, with 4 different passes. The 4 days include Industry Day, 2 days of main events and speakers, and lastly, a festival day, which is a day of music and networking. Prices will continue to rise over the next few months, so get in early and use our affiliate code for 10% off your tickets. Remember to use the code Bitcoin Matrix for 10% off your tickets at checkout. And now, let's get back into the Bitcoin Matrix with Texas Slim as we get into how the One World Food Group is hijacking your taste buds, false desires, and food addiction.
Well, they started hijacking the taste buds in the 90s as well. I mean, they've said, "Ooh, we're onto something here." It started in the fast food industry for one. Because McDonald's, in the beginning, everybody goes, "What makes fries so good in McDonald's?" Right? Well, McDonald's used to cook with talent, used to cook with basically lard for years and years and years. Well, when we started doing the false commodities, McDonald's was the first to move off of talent, and now they're basically 90% of the fast food industry is fake commodity canola, rapeseed. So the fast food industry really started taking off in the late 70s, 80s, and especially in the 90s, it blew up. We were able to basically supersize our meals. We were basically able to engineer our taste buds to basically crave more and more food. And they got very good at it very fast. And so we started creating just not false commodities. We started really creating a lot of false foods that have no business being in our digestive systems.
Right. And is this creating false desires,
false
or
desires,
addiction?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. What it did, it created a food addiction that I think is the white elephant of our society. And once again, I always like to tell everybody, this is not a judgment on anybody. It's not. This is not saying you're obese, it's your fault. There's a lot of things that have gone on that we have not been aware of that has caused the obesity and the cravings and the desires. One of the biggest things I do whenever I'm advising, I tell people, you need to take a step back and ask yourself, why do you desire what you desire? Really take an inventory here, and let's start from scratch. Okay, well, it's the taste. Well, it's the craving I get after 3 hours. I'm always hungry. Okay, now we've got a conversation. Now we can discuss something. And so they have hijacked our taste buds. It is something that actually the nutritional and dietitians were brought into as well, because they would say, okay, you don't have to have refined sugar. You can do this fat-free sugar. You can do this substitute sugar. That doesn't do anything. Your body doesn't know what it is. It's going to store it as a fat cell because it doesn't know how to basically get it out of your system. It's not nutritional value. It is empty calories, blah, blah. We all know the story. And so by hijacking our taste buds, they've basically hijacked our body's ability to understand what true nutrition is and what isn't. And that's why we have to get back to the source of the seed, the purity of the seed, because it's everything. It's everything that we do now. And I think a lot of people, you talk about food addictions. My father's LCDC. He's a licensed chemical dependency counselor. He was 20 something years into the industry. I can look at food now as being just as high powered, just as critical as alcohol and drug addiction, because our bodies, whenever we do not eat, and if we're addicted to highly processed foods, and we have to eat every 3 to 4 hours, our bodies are going through a form of a detoxification it does not understand, and people do not understand. And that's why they cannot get off of this highly processed fake commodity food, because they're engineered never to get off of it.
Yeah. What I learned also from me, right, is like just this, the lack of nutritional value is leading to this weird starvation where we don't look hungry. Sure. We're eating a lot, but we're always hungry. And it's just a strange dynamic. I feel like we're living in a food matrix. And I remember distinctly, and you noted the year 1992 in your piece, Harvest of Deception. I kind of remember this messaging maybe a little earlier, but it's probably just my memory being wrong. But I remember walking into I love pizza, especially growing up, and I would go to my local pizza shop. And I remember a big poster that was like, you're going to get everything you need from a slice of pizza. And they had the 4 food groups, and, bread was at the bottom of the pyramid. And like, we can give you a lot of bread. We can get a little bit of meat, a little bit of vegetable, and a little bit of dairy. And now you're great. And I remember, and I don't remember if that was FDA approved. I think it was, that sign, which, gave it its fiat credentialism. But I remember even looking at it being like, I don't believe this. But at the same time, it's like, I'll use that as a way to get through my day, and I'll eat pizza and I'll justify it. They're saying it's okay. And, it's really strange that, we've been going through that for now 30, 40, 50 years with everything, we're just, going down different verticals here. I want to turn to the farmer, though. And, what is the farmer's perspective on this?
Yeah, definitely. This is going to get touchy, and this will get deep. And I want to preface everything with, I respect every farmer out in the United States. They are the backbone of our country in ways that people will never be able to give them thanks for. And they feed us, and it's not a cliche. It is a country and Western song, but here we go. The farmer, a lot of farmers, and I'm not saying all of them, because there's some farmers out there that know more than I do about this, and they're cheering me on. Some of them don't want to hear what I'm saying, but in the large part, the American farmer has been captured by the global corporation, the One World Food Group, and they can't get out, and they don't know how to get out. It's as simple as that. And they're going to sell, and they're in the global corporations know that, because they're already selling. Bill Gates is the #1 farmland owner in the United States. That goes into another story there. But the farmer overall in the United States is captured. They just want to farm. That's all they care about. And they don't want to lose their heritage. They don't want to lose the tradition. And you look at it, I'm uncovering stuff that nobody wants to talk about. I'm going to piss off a lot of people. But what's going on is they do. Whenever I was on harvest, I was harvesting some pretty shitty stuff with the rapeseed. Guess what? I felt good at the end of the day. I worked my ass off. I had a sense of empowerment. I had a skill set. I had, camaraderie with the other guys. We watched the sun go down together. There's stuff that is combined with the corruption of the seed right now. And that is why this is very confusing. This is why a lot of people do not want to talk about it. And this is why we're basically losing our metabolic health. We're basically losing our power through the poison that is giving us empowerment.
How is the poison giving us empowerment? I wanted
because
to go.
But the poison is the rapeseed that we're harvesting.
Okay.
The poison. So I'm basically getting empowered because I'm a hardworking man.
Right.
That's what I meant. And not by the consumption by any means.
No, I got what you're saying. So, do the farmers own the land that they're farming at this point?
Some of them do, some of them don't. That got broken up. My grandfather, he planted, he grew, he harvested, he sold. Now, and he owned the land. Now you've got people that do own the land, but they can't plant the seeds they want to.
Right.
So they have to take care of they have to be the, they have to basically take care of the land how they're told to. Then you have farmers that just farm and they lease the land. And then you have basically you got people like Bill Gates that owns, hundreds of thousands of acres, and he leases the land, and he'll basically lease out the farmers. And so they're just basically technicians anymore. They're just doing what they love to do.
Right. I just don't think it just doesn't seem right that farmers don't own the land they're farming.
Right.
It doesn't seem like it's going to have any good incentives for anybody.
Well, that happened. Yeah, that happened in the 80s. That really started happening in the 80s. I don't know if a lot of people remember Farm Aid with Willie Nelson, but that was what was going on there. That's when the fake dollar really kicked in. We had a decade in the early 80s. Farmers just started losing their land. They couldn't afford their equipment. They couldn't, afford their, the land to basically wasn't bringing them enough profit to basically make the land payments. And so that was engineered by basically a false dollar and then basically a false commodity that had no value to it. And we've seen what has happened. And moving forward, and there's a lot of people in the Bitcoin space that are doing a very good job, from Joel with Untapped. You've got a lot of people saying, hey, we got to get back to owning the land and doing it the right way this time. And so the farmers should own their land. One thing that they should also do is not own so much land, or not try to own so much land, and basically own less land and farm a more quality product that has more purity of nutrition. We don't go big no more. We don't have to go big no more. And that's what I'm bringing back are these small mesh communities saying, hey, let's build a mesh community of animal protein and of organic produce. Yep. And a lot of people are doing it. There's a lot of successes out there. It's not something that is impossible, and it's picking up steam.
Yeah, but before to kind of maybe outline the One World Food Group and what we're getting out there, could you kind of like talk about the concentration in the food industry around things like processing and milling, the seed business we've kind of touched on,
sure,
and different aspects of the farming industry or the agricultural industry?
Sure. I'm gonna kind of leverage into the beef industry with this. Basically, the last, close to 10 years, basically all of the seed companies have been brought in together. They've been corporate takeovers, or they've basically mergers with all the seed companies. Seed companies go back hundreds of years. You can trace some of these seed companies back to the early monarch days. So this is something that has been going on for a long time, controlling the seed. So we had a lot more seed companies before the 90s, and through especially this last decade, we have very few seed companies left on a global scale. They can act like hey, I'm different from Cargill, I'm different from Monsanto. They're not. They're all under Bayer now. So most of these companies are owned by
That blew my mind.
Yeah. medicine.
Yeah. I mean, like I might have heard that back in 2019, but like went, and then I was reading your article and I'm like, wait, Bayer owns Monsanto.
Yeah.
And with everything going on currently with the pharmaceutical industry and that linkage there was just startling. You start the facts you're outlining, you think about a food cartel, the power to control people.
Yes.
And I'm, these families, it seems like they've been secret or, they're.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're secret. They don't need any publicity. Why would they want publicity? They don't need any, you can't get our interviews with anybody in the Cargill family.
Well, I think to maybe like emphasize like how important the control of the food is, like could you maybe dig a little, like go a little deeper on like the old food routes and the trade routes and Venice and
sure,
and like because you mentioned that some of these current companies are just built on basically ancient empires or old long families from long ago who were still in control over these systems.
Yeah, they're basically monarch families. The trade routes from days gone by, they still own those same trade routes. China is trying right now to change those trade routes. We know that. And so that's going to be a big global shakeup. But, they own everything from the trade route. They own the shipping lanes. They own the ships themselves. They own every passage throughout. And it's nothing has changed. We're still using the same, pretty much the basic trade routes that we did with, selling ships, whenever we came across. They basically were the shipping lines, and all these shipping lines are the same things that were created. What did we need from Europe when we came to the United States? More than anything, we needed food. We needed seeds. And so they were controlling these shipments of seeds. They were establish our agricultural world in the United States in ways we don't even talk about, but they do go back ancient times. Why would you change a trade route whenever you've owned it the whole time through these families? They're very protective of their information. Cargill has an intelligence apparatus that mirrors the CIA. It is a global intelligence apparatus. They have over 7,000 agents on the ground at any one time. They have satellites. They control the ships. They control ports. Why? Because they're controlling the seed. This is something that does go back to a long time ago. I'm not a historian, but I'm becoming more and more of one. And, that's a podcast within itself to where we could really dissect, back to the, Venice, like you say, back to Greece, back to Rome, and how they transported their seeds from Rome to Jerusalem. I guarantee you, we could find some lineage there that'd be fascinating.
Yeah. I want to read a little piece from your article, The Harvest of Deception, to kind of outline this. And you mentioned some of these facts, but I really want to pound this home. Cargill is representative of all the grain companies, and a brief examination of it gives insight into all the others. Cargill, which had $101 billion in annual sales in 2014, has a dominant position in many aspects of the world food trade. It is the world's and the United States' #1 grain exporter and has a market share of 25 to 30% in each of several commodities. It is the world's #1 cotton trader, the #1 U.S. owner of grain elevators, the #1 U.S. manufacturer of corn-based high-protein animal feeds, the #2 U.S. wet corn miller and the U.S. soybean crusher, the #2 Argentine grain exporter, the #3 U.S. flour miller, U.S. packer, U.S. pork packer, slaughterer, and U.S. commercial animal feeder, the #3 French grain exporter, and the #6 U.S. turkey producer. It also has a fleet of 420 barges, 11 towboats, 2 huge vessels that sail the Great Lakes, 12 ocean-going ships, 2,000 railroad hopper cars, and 2,000 tank cars. Cargill has been able to place its people in top posts around the world. Today, Cargill Company is privately owned and run by the McMillan family. The McMillan's family collective wealth sits at $15.1 billion. one, it sounds like they're worth way more than that, and somehow they're hiding it. And two, it sounds like the mob. When I think about like Seagram's and what they did with the Kennedy family to, run legal liquor out of Canada down into the U.S. And then I'm sure everywhere Seagram's planes, ships, and trains went, a lot of stuff that also kind of coincided with that. Maybe they weren't just shipping alcohol. Maybe they were shipping prostitutes or drugs.
Shipping whatever.
Yeah. I mean, they have international clearance. They have nation state level intelligence apparatus and equipment. I mean, these are quite formidable companies. And when you have that kind of control over the industry, I mean, you can really, it makes me think about food warfare and what we're going through right now. Turning a little bit more to present times, like we're seeing some sort of supply chain issues. You've written about it a little bit around you've written about it extensively about beef shortage deception. And I'd love to talk about that. So you mentioned that, there's probably plenty of beef, but the processors are slowing down the production or the processing of that beef. And why is that? What do you see there?
Well, right now, there's plenty of cattle. We don't have a shortage of cattle. We have 4 major processors in the United States: JBS, Tyson, National, and Cargill. Okay. They've always been the bottleneck of any type of basically protein delivery to the nation. They control basically what gets processed in the timely manner. They're using it now saying, hey, COVID, we didn't have enough people to work. Well, that's might be the case, but there's a bigger thing going on here. We're about to go through basically the climate change stuff, a carbon credit economy. Everything's about to kick off in Glasgow on Sunday. JBS, Tyson, especially Tyson, and National and Cargill all have new contracts with fake meat companies, from 3D printed meat to vegetable pea protein and soybean meat that Mr. Bill Gates is basically on 60 Minutes promoting. You're seeing Ashton Kutcher and Leonardo basically, get up in front of the UN. So what they're doing is their plan and their agenda is to make beef the new caviar. And they're going to say that beef is basically a carbon hazard. And so by being a carbon hazard, you're a bad person for consuming beef anymore. They're not going to kill the industry, but if they, in the next couple, let's say the next 2 years, if they can kill 20% of it, they're winning. That's going to drive a lot of cattle ranchers out. That's going to drive a lot of farmers out. That's going to do a lot of things to the cattle industry. And so they've already spent, I think, upwards of $400 billion on this new fake commodity industry. And, there's a country behind that, which is Jerusalem. They're basically doing all the science and all the 3D printing technology. And now what they're doing is they're going to say that they can grow beef from animal cells. And so they've got a whole industry already pre-built, ready to be released onto the world. And I would say by as early as November 13, you're going to start seeing a lot of new commercials on TV. And it's all going to be wrapped around carbon credits. It's going to be wrapped around saving the earth. And it's going to be wrapped around saving the planet and eliminating starvation. That's why Bill Gates is getting on all the mainstream media now. And so they're going to kill the beef industry in several ways. That's going to be through what people think about cows. Of course, they did it in the past saying, hey, cholesterol is bad for you. Well, that wasn't the problem, but they made it the problem. And who helped them with that? The pharmaceutical and medical industries did that. So you're going to see the same approach with the new beef shortage manipulation and them trying to kill the beef industry that we saw in the 70s. And we're going to see it now because they know it works. They know people will buy a shiny package, and they've done everything from labeling food laws to basically saying that we don't have to tell you what's in this fake meat, because they have a new GRAS rule. It's GRAS, and it's the FDA, and they just release 1,000 new chemicals that they can add into food, and they do not have to tell us what they are.
Yeah.
And so all of this is being coordinated, and it's about to kick off. It's called COP26. It's the climate change conference, a UN climate change conference. None of this has to do with the climate. It has everything to do with basically creating a whole new fake commodity and basically keeping us in metabolic failure, as they've had success doing, and they're going to do it the same way they've been doing it for 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, I felt it in my own life. When I was very young, around like, I don't know, 8 or 9, I was diagnosed with very high cholesterol, and because I was eating a lot of eggs and bacon, and I was having for breakfast and sometimes dinner, especially when I would travel with my family. And even in my 20s, I gave up meat. I thought that would be good for me. I thought that'd be good for the environment. The first 6 months were great, and then I brain drain for a long time. And it's interesting, you try to think about these things from different angles. We're in a dust bowl of sort of information noise,
right?
And it's one thing to kind of think about it on the individual level, like, oh, I'm reading this messaging wrong, or I've learned from my own individual experience. But when you look at sort of the farmland ownership, we've touched on a little bit about with Bill Gates buying a lot of farmland and other wealthy billionaires, and I think water rights are very much tied to that.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. And I think about sort of like, meat as caviar and fake meat and just this nutritional starvation. What I thought was really interesting in your piece about high value lifestyles is you point out that, when you look at all these corporations and how they're working together and coordinating, like, we are the product.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And maybe can you elaborate on what you mean by that? Because it's really fascinating to think about, like, from that perspective.
Sure. By becoming the product, we started becoming the product with big data, and they were able to mine data basically in a very intelligent way. So whenever we signed up for Facebook, that was free, all that kind of stuff, we became the product because we were generating data. Correct. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I talk about, food and becoming the product, really in a bigger picture, we're the recycling bin of the trash. And, in the cattle industry, basically, let's say in the industrial factory feedlots, where basically the cattle is just basically a processor. All they're doing is importing and exporting that grain by Cargill in and out of those feedlots, and they're making, of course, money off of this beef because their beef is nice and fat because it's full of hormones and all kinds of nasty chemicals. So the cow is basically the trash can, and we're the recycling bin of that cow. Well, for them to make profit, it has to end up into the monetary exchange value, which is the human, basically. So we become the product, and we create the data. We recycle the waste, and so they can restart the whole circus, basically the food circus, all over again. We are the hamster wheel. And, taking the cow out of basically the nutritional delivery system, well, they've already done it in a lot of ways with basically feedlot ranching. And so now they can just do it with a fake commodity that they say tastes like meat. And so what we are, once again, we're the product. We're the product of their profit and their runaway fiat profit at that. If beef was like my grandfather ate, everybody's grandparents ate, or great grandparents, whatever you want to call it. If the beef was as pure as it was back then, we would not have nearly the amount of food that we have right now, and we would not have the amount of demand to eat food like we do as a nation. And now we're turning it on to the world, and we're going to say it's about basically curing hunger and saving the planet. It has nothing to do with it. The type of food that they're going to use, the type of chemicals and everything that they're going to do as far as fertilizers and pesticides with all these fake new GMO seeds that they're about to have data attributes to, we're going to destroy the planet even more. We've already destroyed our soil. So, the soil used to be the product. There's so many things that used to be the product. Now we have stakeholder capitalism, which is going to lead right into a human capital bond market, and they're going to create hedge funds off of us. We are the product.
Yeah. What do you mean by they're going to create hedge funds off of us? I kind of get where you're going with this, but I'd love for you to.
Well, we're going to bring data into this again. Let's look at the housing market crash of 2008. They had certain hedge funds, basically with these, certain mortgages. You were put into a hedge fund, high risk, low risk, medium. Yeah, exactly. So what they did is they're able to do that off of data of, your high risk, low risk, whatever. Well, they've advanced that into what type of consumer are you? Are you somebody like me that does not basically eat centralized food anymore as much as possible? Or are you somebody that eats at freaking McDonald's every day? Or are you somebody that shops at Walmart? Do you do half your shopping at Walmart and half your shopping at Whole Foods? There's all kinds of different attributes that are being created by our basically spending habits when it comes to food. Are you Chick-fil-A? Or are you McDonald's? Are you Taco Bell? Or are you, whatever it is? They know all this stuff because they're in with the banks, they're in with, everything, all data is, available now. We know that. And so by doing that, they can put us in certain type of hedge funds. Are you going to be high risk? They know looking at you, are you going to have diabetes now? You're going to do this. By controlling the food more than we've ever had them control it, basically digitizing food, that's the big agenda here, is get real-time data off the food that you're eating every second of every minute of every day. By digitizing the food, they can put you in hedge funds in the One World Food Group, all the major food companies from the PepsiCos to the Coca-Colas to Nabisco, all those guys at the very top. I've got a couple of maps on one of my articles you can look at. Basically, those guys get to bet on you saying, I want this group over here. I get to market to them. I get to sell to them. I have every type of nutrition that we can say that the body needs. So they're going to be buying from me. So they'll bid on you on the high level. That's the stakeholder capitalism, which creates the human capital bond market.
Yeah. I mean, just makes me feel more and more like I'm living in a matrix.
Well, in a lot of ways we are. I
mean, but I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's fine. No,
I'm kind of curious, like, if I, two things. One, when I was younger, I could eat a lot of shit and my body my engine would deal with it, and as I get older, like that's not working for me. So I'm making changes, but like what kind of long-term accumulation effects am I dealing with? Especially when I think about like where the product, where what's kind of being the dumpster bin. So, you think Bayer or Monsanto, like they're feeding me this shit and then like, I'm going to get sick from it. And maybe I'm at a place where like, how much damage have I done to myself? If I've been shopping from the middle of the supermarket for a little bit.
Actually, it depends on the individual, of course, and there's some really good doctors out there that are on Twitter. Dr. Ovadia, I Fix Hearts, and Dr. Sean Baker, which he leads a carnivore type of group. Those guys deal with all kinds of different people that have either had really bad diets all their life or they've been in the middle of the road. Basically, me being the amateur nutritionist that I am, I just eat a lot of beef. But I would say it's like smoking. If you quit smoking, your lungs are going to repair. Same with your body, your metabolical structure. If you're not type 2 diabetes, you're going to turn things around. Even if you are type 2 diabetes, it can turn around. Even if you are morbidly obese, you can change your life. I don't think it's really ever too bad. It will never be so bad that you should not try changing your lifestyle and doing it with food intelligence that I'm bringing. And so I was the same way. I mean, we also, and I want to throw this in here, the food we're eating right now is not even close to the food we were eating 10 years ago. That's the big kicker that we have to remember. Eating 10 years ago like shit is not like eating shit right now. It's 10 times worse. That's what we need to put into perspective here.
Yeah, I'm worried about my children and everyone's
Yes.
kids and the next generation.
Yes.
I'm going to read two pieces from your article. Let the people applaud not those who protect their interest, but those who provide them with pleasure. Let no severe duty be commanded, no impurity forbidden. What does that quote mean to you?
Well, I hid that in there. That is a quote from St. Augustine out of the book City of God. What that was in reference to, that was the fall of Rome and how he saw people acting during the fall of Rome. When the barbarians basically stormed the city, say you can hide in the cathedrals, but everybody else, you're going to die. Nobody really paid attention to it, but in the end, they tried to hide in the cathedrals, and then they blamed the Christians for the barbarians to come and kill them all. But what they were really doing is they were not paying attention. They were not basically looking at the source of their seed of existence, of their morals and values, of their desires. And so St. Augustine wrote that, and I had a friend that, he read that to me, and I go, I got a place for that. So I put that into that article to make people say, wow, because I could have wrote that and said I wrote that, and people would have thought it is today.
Right.
Yes.
I'll read another piece. Our food that we are consuming is killing us, and it is being done with world-class marketing and the power of the fiat dollar, with expert data mining and analysis. Our government and global corporations and investment firms are designing this form of game theory. You are being profiled by your food consumption and your desire to search for taste, convenience, and comfort. You are a game character. I thought that was kind of alarming. I don't ever want to be a game character, especially in someone else's game. So what can we do, like, just to get started?
Well, I look at it like this. I've always been a pretty okay. I grew up kind of athletic. I grew up, country boy. We're kind of tough, and we're just grew up different, and that's said with humility. As far as food consumption and how because everybody wants a solution, right? And I don't want to just alarm people. I want people to say, hey, I've got to change my lifestyle. How am I going to do it? That's why I'm starting to bring that into my writing. The one thing that you need to start with is basically animal protein. As much as they try to destroy animal protein, that's how much you need to pursue pure animal protein. Even if you can't pursue it right now, there's ways that I'm going to present that you can evolve into getting pure animal protein. And once again, all this is self-funded. I haven't been paid a dime from anybody. I'm doing all this on my own. So I'm not shilling anybody for any monetary gains here. I'm not a LARP. I'm not one of those guys out there taking advantage. What I would look at starting out from scratch is look and eliminate one fake commodity out of your life. If that's high fructose corn syrup, if that's soybean, if that's canola, just eliminate it and don't touch it anymore. Start there, and you're going to see changes because they're in everything. So you'll be able to say, hey, I'm going to change a little bit, and I'm not going to try to reinvent the wheel here because we can't. And sometimes you're going to be horrible at it, but you're going to get there, and you're going to start feeling better. One thing, your mental aspect is you're going to start feeling better. Two, you're going to feel smarter. You're going to feel more empowered. You're not going to be feeling like you're in the dark anymore. You're going to ask yourself, why do I desire what I desire? What I did, because I was eating, on harvest, I had to eat like crap. I had to eat pizza pockets every day, because you're on the go so much. I couldn't do anything about that. But I'd slowly incorporated beef into our diets on harvest. I went out there and I contacted the local beef producers, and I got grass-fed beef to everybody. We started eating grass-fed beef, and it wasn't any more expensive. So people have the wrong, perspective when it comes to doing something like this. You're going to eat less. You're going to shop less for overly processed garbage, and you're going to buy more, better, basically pure protein. So start with protein, because protein makes you smarter. It makes you more empowered. It makes you healthier. It makes you stronger. It tastes better. It's better for you. So do what it takes. And, tuning into me and my lifestyle stuff, I'm going to bring out every grass-fed rancher, every beef producer I can in the state of Texas. And I'm creating a lifestyle out of doing that. And everybody else can do. Let's say Austin. Austin has tons of grass-fed beef producers outside of Austin in the hill country. Take your Saturday, quit watching Netflix, go out to the hill country, buy you some grass-fed beef and bring it home. And then you got 2 weeks of food security. You know what you're going to be preparing. You can do whatever you need to do to fit your lifestyle and your work schedule and all that.
Yeah. In terms of food security, in terms of what we're going through, do you think this is a form of genocide that's being placed upon us?
Me and Princey talked about that on Once Bitten, and I have to lead in truth, and it ain't my truth, it's the damn truth. You're damn right, we're doing a genocide. We're doing a genocide of a culture that has taken basically 50 years to kill our metabolical health. You cannot look at our society, you cannot go anywhere and say there's not an issue going on here. You're damn right, it's a genocide, and they know it. They know what they're doing, and they're in cahoots with each other, from our medical field to our pharmaceutical to our agricultural. It's not that there's bad people involved in this. They're all captured in a way that they have to provide. They have to put food on the table, and the people that pull the strings know this. Why do we have a medical and chemical company growing our food? Because they get to create the prescriptions and the medical care. They're not proactive, they're reactive. And, our hospitals are overrun basically with people failing from heart disease to diabetes. And it's big business to kill people. And, it's $900 a month for every diabetic to take their insulin. There's things going on that people aren't talking about. And, I'm pissed off for the kids. They're being stolen their childhoods in so many ways, especially with this bullshit COVID marketing plan that they released on the world. This COVID thing, people have died, people have lost loved ones, but we also have not, no one has talked about, if we were in better health, this wouldn't have been such an issue. That's a fact.
You bring up the heart disease and the diabetes, and I think you bring up the notion to me in your writing that it's not being talked about enough.
Of course, it's not.
But I just don't think about it that way, and it really, the statistics are really mind blowing when you think about how much we're comfortable with as a society, dying to those causes, and you're outlining the sort of the profit motive behind it. And I shouldn't say sort of, just the real deal Holyfield of what's going on here. It's really a lot to handle.
Yes.
When you look at it through sort of like the prism we are, and how interlinked these major verticals are with the medicinal, the pharmaceutical, and the food. It's really beyond the pale. I'm kind of curious where does Bitcoin fit in for you with all of this? How is it? Has it changed you at all?
Yeah. I'll tell you my story. I got into Bitcoin too late, and here I am, a guy that's got all kinds of technology skill, and I totally ignored it. I had some reasons I had, a very dear person to me, got very sick, excuses, whatever. But I had an injury and I got laid up pretty hard. I had a portal vein collapse. And so I was down and out for a while. So I had to look at food a little bit, but I also had a chance to look at Bitcoin, and I didn't understand it at first, and I didn't give it a chance, but then something clicked in me, and I understood the decentralization of it because I'm a networker. I understand how the internet wasn't designed to be a centralized communication apparatus. So I had that level of skill of networking and how things happen on the internet. And I was fascinated with how Bitcoin was created, the protocol itself, how it can store value. So my mind clicked. I said, hey, I've just been given a portal into my own mind that's always been there. Now I get to frame it in a way that I can understand it. And Bitcoin is helping me frame it that way. And so everything became decentralization. decentralization. And I think that's where a lot of us kind of start looking at our world, because we start looking at money. We start looking at the American dollar. We start looking at the central banks, the Fed. We start looking at our, governments. We start looking, well, what did I do? I looked at food. And I said, oh my gosh, now I understand what's going on here. Now I got to dive into it the way I know how to dive into it. And if it wasn't for Bitcoin, I probably would have never, ever even got into food intelligence. So I give it all to Bitcoin. And it's sad that people don't give Bitcoin a chance beyond whatever the value it is, let's say monetary value, that they're not giving it a chance on a way of thinking that's going to make them a better person. It's going to make them more intelligent and more empowered in ways that they don't know. And I wish we'd have more conversations about that instead of just say number go up all the time.
Yeah. Definitely. And that's one of the reasons I started the podcast. Definitely have conversations like this and not just to talk about number grow up, even though that's one of the things that are probably the most important thing about Bitcoin in terms of bringing attention to it and value to it and convincing other people to put their life energy into it. But it's not always the most, or it's definitely one of the least interesting things to talk about philosophically. And, but also once you get it, you kind of want to expand your horizons and look to other things that you need to address. And one thing that you write is, along the lines of money, but, your non-fitness standards, i.e. mind, body, spirit in life have become our new fitness standards.
Right.
So let's just touch a little bit on body though. What is your diet like?
Ever since I got laid up and everything, it's been several years ago, but, basically, I just got back into, being more athletic. I've always been athletic. I'm internationally certified ski instructor. I've always done all kinds of things. But what I decided to do is like, hey, I need to get empowered again. I need to get some core strength back. So I've always been a steak eater, a protein eater. And so I started following a few people, Alexander Cortez, he's in the Bitcoin world. And, basically, I started doing some intermittent fasting because I wanted to eliminate sugar out of my life because I understand how bad processed foods are, carbos, and I already knew that. So I started an intermittent fasting regimen, and basically I basically eat my weight in protein every day. And I intermittent fast most of the time, probably 5 days of the week. I usually do about 18 hours off, 6 on. And within those 6 hours, I'll do bouts of eating about 25 to 50 grams of protein at a time. Usually your body will only really use 25 grams of protein at a time. So you kind of have to watch out, because then you're just wasting that protein. So you kind of have to have a lifestyle that, fits. If I'm not intermittent fasting, I'm loading up with eggs and beef in the morning, and I'll eat a late lunch, and then I'll eat a early dinner. And, I'm in the gym or doing something active 6 days out of the week. So I'm burning a lot. I'm 6'1". I weigh 178 pounds right now. If I didn't eat like this, I'd be 220 pounds.
Right.
And so, it can happen to anybody, but, and I'm, like I said, I'm 6'1" and I weigh 178 and I feel fantastic.
Yeah. Are they raw eggs that you're eating?
Most of the time. Yeah. Most of the time I get local eggs. I got a buddy that does a lot of chickens. And so I just get 3 dozen eggs, I'll do about 6 a day. And raw eggs, there's nothing wrong with raw eggs.
The war on eggs, man. I'm having mine go on Matter on soon.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, with growing up with salmonella and the scares, and you just think about how that's really just to obfuscate the industry practices in these large egg factories, basically. And it's really about, protecting them and not really about nutritional value or what's best for you.
How did we evolve 1,000 years without all their help? It's a load. We don't give ourselves a chance to step back. Eggs are so good for you. It's a great way to mine protein that people do not give credit for. Has nothing. I have my blood checked every year and my blood is perfect. I have no issues with my blood, and I got all kinds of cholesterol delivery to my system. They say, oh, too much cholesterol is going to give you a heart attack if you drink raw eggs. I mean, they never stop. They killed the dairy industry. They killed milk. You cannot get whole, fresh milk anymore. It has to be pasteurized. What does pasteurization mean? They take all the animal fat out of it. I mean, give me a break. Everything that's positive about milk, they take it out and they tell you that you're going to die if you drink good milk.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we didn't touch on, how even, through the control of these industries, through speculation and market dynamics, farmers are hiding grain.
Sure.
Certain food products get burned, and I wonder, if we would just figure everything out tomorrow and want to change everything, it would probably take us a couple of decades to reverse these trends in so many fronts, from the farming and the way we, the seed and the land. And some of this, I'm just concerned that we're never going to be able to reverse, like around seed technology and, because of cross contamination. I'm just concerned. My final question to you, though, is I'd love for you to tell us about what you're doing with the Texas Beef Initiative.
Sure. I thought that the Texas Beef Initiative, since we are in Texas, there's 248,000 farmers and ranchers in Texas. That's a lot of people that are in this type of business and industry. So I wanted to tackle the Texas Beef Initiative, and I want to bring Bitcoin into the independent beef, animal supplier, and produce industry in the state of Texas. We have some different Texas beef laws that a lot of states don't have. We don't have to rely as much on the USDA as other states. And so I'm able to go up to an independent beef producer that is somebody that raises his cattle, somebody that produces his cattle, processes his cattle, sells his beef. And so by doing that, it's very decentralized. But he also relies on a smaller community, a mesh network that I brought up earlier. So I want to go to these guys first across the state of Texas. I want to get them into adopting Bitcoin because they're already living a decentralized life. And I want them to leverage the Bitcoin philosophy as they've always done. They just haven't known it yet. And so bringing beef together, pure grass-fed beef, or just good beef. I'm not going to say it's all grass-fed because there's still a lot of good beef out there that's not grass-fed. But get these cattle, these beef producers that are basically giving us good, pure protein to our bodies and our minds and our spirits. Let's get them on the Bitcoin standard in a way that they're going to be able to survive and fight this big battle that you just, you pointed out. It is a parallel, basically, society that's going on. Nobody can deny that. And I know that basically 90% of the people probably won't pay attention to what I'm doing. If I can get 3% of the 10% to really change their lives and change their patterns, we're going to get some momentum that's going to basically beat these guys back. They're not as organized as everybody thinks they are. We can do the grassroots level stuff that I'm doing, and we can win this because there's a lot of people out there that are disconnected with this type of thinking, and especially the power of Bitcoin thinking and the Bitcoin store of value in their lives. So merging all this together, I'm going to do it in the state of Texas. I'm working with guys down in Austin right now. I'm up in the Panhandle. I'm going to start meeting people all across the state. I'm going to go to the ranches. I'm going to have a toolkit that I'm going to announce in Austin. I'm going to be on Marty Bent's show, and I'm going to announce the toolkit. I'm going to announce several other things. And then we're going to, as a small team, create a podcast to give people weekly, daily, probably twice a week updates on the beef initiative, where to get your beef, where to source it. If you're down in Abilene, if you're over in Dallas, if you're down in Houston, all you got to do is tune into the beef initiative. And if somebody knows and they're already sourcing their beef, then they're going to let me know. And we're going to create basically a platform, and it's going to be a basically decentralized, beef initiative that we're going to use the Bitcoin protocol, and we're not going to do a centralized type of thing. Everything that we're going to do is going to be decentralized.
Yeah, we need to build these decentralized networks and everything.
We do. Yeah.
I really wonder, like, having conversations like this, am I going to have to farm, everything I need to eat? And I hope not. I hope these initiatives will alleviate that concern. On the other hand, I mean, I do think that whether I need to or not, I want to grow more stuff at home,
Sure.
just to be more connected to food and food sources. And I think it's great for the kids and things of that nature. But I really hope that we don't have to be, you know, as resilient as our ancestors were through the Dust Bowl.
I don't think we're going to have to. I think that, you know, with technology, not all of it wasn't bad around food. Let's get that perspective out there. A lot of it was very good. I mean, we can grow, you know, Manhattan, you can grow really good vegetables in small little spots in Manhattan. So there's a lot of things we can leverage. We always have to keep our food in perspective too. And we have to keep, you know, put the roadmap ahead of us. We got to keep that in perspective. It's not doomsday, but it could be if you keep on eating the way they want us to eat.
Yeah.
And so, you know, everybody has their individual story in their individual journey, you know, and it's not a zero-sum game, and it never will be. But if you want to have a purity of life, if you want the sovereignty that we all talk about, the citadel, if you want the citadel of the mind, it's going to start with food intelligence. I'm sorry. It's going to, because they're about to change the food industry in ways that people are not aware of.
And health is wealth.
Health is wealth. So, you know, that matters.
It really does. Yeah. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation. It's been really dope. Let everyone know where they could find you on Twitter and everywhere else, and definitely your writing. It's really insightful, impactful, and I've been eating it up.
Yeah, it's at modern T Man on Twitter. It's Texas Slim, and then my newsletter is initiative.substack.com. Those two places are going to be the best right now. And then probably within a month, there's going to be a whole new platform that I'm releasing and everything. It's in development. So basically Twitter, I love Twitter. Bitcoin Twitter is dope. I mean, this all just, it's too fun.
It's a lot of fun.
And I get to ship posts and everything, but I get to spread a lot of intelligence through there, and a lot of people are starting to pay attention. And I really appreciate, you know, all you podcasters, for one, having me on. I appreciate you appreciating my writing. You know, that's good, because I really am trying to be very intentional with it to help people. I'm not doing this to get attention. I really want people to change their lives and just be aware, because, you know, we want to live in truth. We want to live with some virtue and some honesty. And that's what I'm trying to bring to the table. And, you know, it's going to be very important. I'm not going to back down, and I'm going to piss off a lot of people out there that don't want the truth, but I'm up for the fight. So let's do this.
Yeah, the writing has been incredible. The pieces, I've been devouring them. I'm about halfway through them. This show, we only really covered the first piece, The Harvest of Deception, which I really recommend people read that one and the others. We pulled some themes from some of them, but I'd love to have you back on. We have a lot more to get into. You've covered a lot of ground. You've been prolific, and I'm really enjoying them. And you mentioned it a little bit in the blog, but I can't wait to put it all together for the book.
Yeah, in the book, and this is a small possibility, and I'm really shooting for it. Instead of Harvest next year, hopefully in the spring, I'm really trying to go on the road to do a 6-week documentary, and then get back to Austin and do the production. And hopefully that's going to happen. And we'll see how much traction I get here, but that might be something that happens. I could see us Bitcoiners doing that, and I could see, you know, us teaming up to do something like that. So, you know, stay tuned. I'd love to be back on the show again. Pay attention the next couple of weeks with Glasgow, and then I'll come back with a good report. This Sunday is going to be a short one, but I believe it's the 13th or 14th of November. There'll probably be a pretty big one that comes out.
Awesome. Can't wait. This has been incredible. Thank you so much, Texas Slim. It's been an honor.
Thank you, Cedric. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Peace.
Take care. Mm-hmm.
This episode with Texas Slim on the Harvest of Deception, food centralization, and the One World Food Group was brought to you by LEDN, Bitcoin Magazine, and the Bitcoin 2022 Conference. LEDN.io is a secure, simple, and easy-to-use platform for managing and growing your digital wealth. If you want to see what it's all about and get 50 free in USDC when you take out your first LEDN loan, head over to start.ledn.io/Bitcoin Matrix. Last year, over 10,000 Bitcoiners came to celebrate Bitcoin at Bitcoin 2021. But for Bitcoin 2022, they're expecting tens of thousands of crazy, rabid Bitcoiners. It's going to be off the hook, and I hope to see you there, and maybe we could chill out with a cold beer. For 10% off, make sure to use the code BitcoinMatrix at checkout. You can follow the show on Twitter at DayLabBTCMatrix, and you can follow me on Twitter at CedJungelman. Both accounts have Bitcoin tips turned on. I know how precious those sats are, so thanks to you those who have already hit me up with some precious Satoshis. I've decided to go full-time on the show and pursue a career in Bitcoin, so your support means a lot. If you are a Bitcoin company and interested in reaching a large audience of discerning Bitcoiners, hit me up. My Twitter DMs are open, or email me at cedricjungelman@gmail.com. And thank you for listening. If you dig the chats, please make sure to subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends and family. Stack sats, stay humble and laser focused. This is Cedric. Peace.